The story of Nefertiti, the Queen of Egypt during Akhenaten's reign, is covered in mysteries, but she also had a key role in resurrecting ancient Egypt. In today's video, we'll find out more about the history of this Egyptian queen. Nefertiti lived between 1370 BC and 1336 BC and acted as the wife of the pharaoh Akhenaten during Egypt's 18th dynasty. Her family background is still vague, providing little insight into her lineage. Her name, meaning the most beautiful has arrived, led many scholars to consider the possibility that Nefertiti could have had a foreign origin. Under Amenhotep III, around 300 Mitanni women were brought to Egypt to join the king's harem, as a friendly gesture from the neighboring empire. Nefertiti may have been one of these women, who adopted an Egyptian name and adapted to the country's customs. But recently, there has been a growing belief that Nefertiti was Egyptian, the daughter of Ai, a high-ranking Egyptian official responsible for the War Chariot Corps, who subsequently became pharaoh following Tutankhamun's death. This assumption implies that Nefertiti's husband was her cousin. Details of Nefertiti's age when she married Amenphis, the future Akhenaten, are vague. In ancient Egyptian society, however, the average age of marriage for women was around 13, while for men it was about 18. Nefertiti probably married Amenhotep shortly before he became king. Initially, Nefertiti's husband was not intended to become king. However, following the death of the heir Thutmose, Amenphis III's eldest son, Akhenaten took over his brother's position. Some authors claim that there was a joint regency between Amenphis III and Akhenaten, but this is still a matter of debate among Egyptologists. The co-regency was common to secure a peaceful succession, by bringing a son into power a few years before the king's death. During the early years of Amenphis IV's reign, religious developments began, which led to the adoption of the doctrine called Atenism, placing the god Aten in a central position. During his 5th year of reign, Amenphis IV decided to change his name to Akhenaten, whilst Nefertiti added the title Nefertiti to her original name, which means perfect is the perfection of Aten. From that moment on, Nefertiti was portrayed wearing a blue crown, unlike the traditional decoration of 2 feathers and a solar disk worn by Egyptian queens. All temples dedicated to Egypt's traditional gods were rededicated by the king to the new and unique god he forced upon the people. There is some debate about the motivations behind Akhenaten's ushering in of monotheism. Whilst some theories imply that it was driven by genuine religious belief, the move is increasingly thought to have been a political maneuver. One likely reason is the intent to undermine the power and wealth of the priests of the god Amun, whose cult was widespread and powerful in Egypt. In Akhenaten's time, these priests were as powerful as the pharaoh himself, as the cult of Amun had become increasingly wealthy and prestigious. For this reason, probably perceiving this rise in priestly power and wishing to fully restore control of the throne, Akhenaten suppressed the adoration of the traditional gods and established Aten as the only deity worthy of veneration. This allowed him to restore his authority as the only direct connection between the people and the deity. This strengthened his position as supreme ruler and allowed him to exercise absolute control over Egypt's religious and political spheres. Akhenaten took a bold decision by building a new capital for Egypt, solely dedicated to Aten. The city was called Akhenaten, meaning the horizon of the Aten. Situated between the cities of Thebes and Memphis, the site where its ruins are today is known as Amarna. Building the city was an important landmark during Akhenaten's reign, and the opening took place during the 8th year of his rule. Nevertheless, after Akhenaten's death, ancient Egypt gradually reverted to its polytheistic religious practices, reinstating the cult of Amun and giving the priests their former status. Nefertiti and Akhenaten had 6 daughters during their marriage. The first 3, Meritaten, Meketaten, and Ankhesenamun, were born in Thebes before the 6th year of their reign, while the last 3, Nefer-Nefer-Nure, Nefer-Neferatan Tasherit, and Setepenra, were born in Akhenaten between the 6th and 9th year of their kingship. The royal family suffered tragedies and losses during Akhenaten's reign. Their second daughter, Meketaten, died shortly before the 12th year of rule, Egypt was also ravaged by disease during this period, which included a widespread plague and a malaria outbreak, then known as the Magic Disease. These epidemics claimed the lives of 3 of the royal couple's daughters. Notwithstanding the hardships endured, the royal family was portrayed in some artistic representations and scenes of family life. Nefertiti was often pictured breastfeeding one of her daughters, whilst the royal couple played with them. Such scenes of family intimacy were groundbreaking for Egyptian art at the time, bringing a more personal and human touch to royal portrayals. As far as Nefertiti's physical appearance is concerned, her artistic depiction indicates that she favored wearing light and sparse clothing, something that was common due to Egypt's hot climate. In some instances, she was depicted wearing a tight dress tied by a belt, with ribbons hanging down the front. In other representations, she wore a short wig. To fit her unusual tall blue crown, Nefertiti is believed to have shaved her head. Nefertiti held a significant role in Egypt's government as co-regent alongside Akhenaten. This allowed the king to dedicate himself as high priest of Aten, while Nefertiti assumed the leadership of the kingdom. This probably meant that she exercised more power than any woman in Egypt before her. Working from the royal palace, Nefertiti was in charge of sending out royal decrees and making decisions that would ordinarily have been attributed to her husband. This dynamic challenged tradition and positioned Nefertiti in a prominent position, performing an active role in governing the kingdom. The only actual representations of Akhenaten and Nefertiti were carved in their burial tombs, where it becomes clear that she was considered the most beautiful woman of the time, while Akhenaten displayed facial features unlike those of traditional Egyptians. As well as Nefertiti, Akhenaten had another wife called Kia, who took a lesser role. Akhenaten had 2 sons with Kia, Nebnefer and Tutankhaten. Unfortunately, Nebnefer died during a plague outbreak that ravaged Egypt. Tutankhaten subsequently returned to Thebes and was forced to change his name to Tutankhamun following the ban on the cult of Aten after his father's death. Kia is thought to have died giving birth to Tutankhamun. Her primary task seems to have been to give Akhenaten male offspring to ensure the reign's continuity, since Nefertiti did not bear him any male children. Immediately after Princess Meketaten's death, Nefertiti vanished from the historical record, and it remains a mystery to this day what really happened to the queen. While the simplest surmise is that she died afterwards, no definite records exist of her death, and no evidence exists of her burial in the Amarna royal tomb. By misinterpreting the textual evidence that had been found in the temple of Maru-Aten at Amarna, early Egyptologists hypothesized that Nefertiti had split up with Akhenaten and retired to the northern palace in Amarna or Thebes. That theory, however, was later debunked. Other speculations reflected that Nefertiti may have adopted the name Smenkhare and ruled alone as a queen before handing over the throne to Tutankhamun. While there is substantial evidence for the existence of a king called Smenkhare, a male body buried in the Valley of the Kings being identified as Tutankhamun's brother means that it is unlikely that Nefertiti and Smenkhare were the same person. The question of Nefertiti's fate remains unanswered to this day. Nefertiti has become quite famous since 1912, owing to her bust being found, one of the most iconic and important works of art in ancient Egypt. It was discovered during excavations in Amarna, making it a significant milestone in the history of Egyptian archaeology. The bust has been exhibited at Berlin's Neues Museum and is a painted limestone sculpture depicting Nefertiti with a placid and highly stylized expression. The piece is regarded as an artistic masterpiece of ancient Egyptian realism. The finesse of the facial features, the intricately detailed eyes, the long neck, and the embellished crown are all distinctive features of the bust, reflecting the queen's beauty and elegance. Discovering Nefertiti's bust sparked great awe and fascination around the world. Indeed, she remains one of the most famous and enigmatic queens of antiquity, with a legacy of power, beauty, and a mystery continuing down the centuries. If you liked learning more about the history of this Egyptian queen, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel.